I, Acting Chair Thomas Kyle, call a hybrid construction industry energy board meeting of October 18th, 2022 to order at 9:32 a.m. Debbie, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Those that are absent this morning is Chair Hansen, a representative from the Mechanical Board, John Camiller, representative from the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, and Travis Argue, member from the State Plumbing Board. I will go through those that are here. Acting as chair from the Electrical and Elevator Board, Thomas Kyle.
Aye, here.
Jerry Heikkinen from the Building Code Structures Board.
Here.
Eric Sandoval from the Building Code Structures Board.
Here.
And in the room, we have Ryan Richard representing the Electrical and Elevator Board.
Here.
Blake Shalide is connected virtually from the State Department of Energy. Blake?
Yep, I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you. Walter Cottle from the Mechanical Board.
Present.
Thank you. And Matt Rozelle from the State Plumbing Board. Matt, your mic is on.
Yes, sorry. Here.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. We do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Debbie. I, Acting Chair Kyle, rule that the agenda in order of business is approved. I, Acting Chair Kyle, rule that the draft minutes of June 21st, 2022 are final. The date of the next scheduled meeting is February 7th, 2023. I would like to, I'll ask Ian to address any general public meeting comments.
Thank you, Acting Chair. Ian Paik, Analyst with Division. We did not receive any requests for public comment. However, I would like to keep the line open for just a moment in case there is anyone in the Zoom that would like to provide public comment.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next on the agenda. I'm looking at a small screen, so I don't able to get the references here. So it's item 3 or 5? 3. Mark Heiser. You're muted, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Chair Kyle and members of the board. Mark Heiser with Building Codes Division, here to provide some updates and reports from the division. First, would like to go through an update relative to, and I'm going to bring up my document here on my screen, some updates about ASHRAE standard 90.1. We'll go into this a little bit more during later in the meeting about the rules relative to the use of standard 90.1 as our energy code. Want to give an update about what should be coming out this year. ASHRAE standard 90.1 2022 is supposed to be published. I was at a ASHRAE standard 90.1 committee meeting last week, and they are working out the last little bits for publication. They have announced that they will have it out before the end of the year, but no guarantees of when actual document will be available for purchase and use. While we were in Atlanta discussing with ASHRAE staff, we are looking to possibly partner with ASHRAE and some other states for development, not only of through some grants that are available, through some recent federal legislation to develop better training for building code officials, but also with ASHRAE working on a more interactive and better sort of standard 90.1 portal or online users manual that's available for people to use the standard and use it in an easier fashion. They're sort of looking at the success that they've had in California. Title 24, they have sort of an online giant user's manual that links to forums, helps people out on figuring out, especially, smaller projects, how to do lighting, how to do your envelope analysis. And we're really hoping that's a successful endeavor for standard 90.1. Otherwise, of course, we're working on the residential code, and that will be in the next section in part 4. Are there any questions from the board at this time?
Okay, thank you, Mark. Agenda item 4A, review of residential energy code and progress of the meeting executive orders. Mark?
Thank you, Acting Chair Kyle. Once again, and to the members of the board present, thank you very much. Mark Heiser with the division. I'm here to present what is happening on the residential side when it comes to the upcoming energy code. The 2023 OSSC work is beginning. I would like to give a presentation at this time to sort of go through how we're progressing on that. Debbie, is the ability to share screen now? Thank you, Debbie. So, would like to give a summary of the 2023 Oregon Residential Specialty Code, sort of how it's being affected by executive orders, and also with where we are in the process, and give an update of how we are progressing. Next slide, please. In summary, an update of the executive orders and the energy code adoption process, where we are in relationship to Executive Order 1720 and also of Executive Order 20-04, sort of show how we're coming up with the modeling to show these results for compliance with both of the executive orders, and give sort of an overview of what is happening in the adoption process and a sort of preview of what will be presented for changes to the current 2021 OSSC that are intended for inclusion in the 2023 code, of course, after it goes through the standard process. Next slide, please. So we've done slides like this for progression of the commercial code. When it comes to the residential energy code provisions, this is a tracking of where we are today in 2022 relative to national model codes. Oregon has been the orange line with blue dots compared to the national model code with the blue line and the orange dots. One thing I'd like to point out on the screen here is, of course, the Oregon line is the actual date of adoption. The blue line, of course, is the date of the publication of the national code. So if we were using the national code, there would be a slight lag of the line of if we'd been using the national code. Next slide, please. So we're looking to meet Executive Order 17-20 with the adoption of the 2023 residential code. There was a requirement that in that executive order that by October of 2023, that the code met the equivalent performance of the U.S. Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program, available during 2017, which was version 0.6. You might hear me saying ZERH occasionally. That is for Zero Energy Ready Home. The division in ODO worked with the DOE ZERH program administrators to get to what are the energy provisions that are relative to building code so that we could move forward with this. And there'll be additional, next slide is about how we're meeting Executive Order 2004. Next slide, please. So Executive Order 2004 was more a directive for code progression through 2030. It said that by 2030, that the building code should have a 60% reduction of the regulated loads relative to what for the residential side is the 2005 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. It also applies to the commercial code covered by the SEB, and it's a 60% reduction relative to what would be our 2004 Oregon Energy Efficiency Specialty Code on the commercial side. So looking back to the 2005 code, of course, in Oregon, that's our starting point. That's what we're going to continue to try to reduce from. Was a fairly advanced code when it started. And as just a reminder of what that executive order means when they say regulated loads, that's the reduction in what's covered under the building code: the heating, the ventilation, the air conditioning, water heating, and lighting. So what's on the permit itself. Unregulated loads are really the process of living in the home. It's cooking, your TVs, your computers, clothes washing, your dishwasher, sort of vacuum cleaners, your Roomba, whatever, that are used for the process of living in the home. Next slide, please. Oh, we've lost a little hunk of our slide, Debbie. Well, I'm not sure what happened here, but this shows that in 2005, we had unregulated loads were, 14% of the overall energy pie, and that regulated loads represented about 86% of the energy use of a home. Of course, a lot of that energy use, you're needing to heat and cool and do water heating and lighting. Since then, and I'm sorry it's not showing for you, that of that blue slice of the pie, 37% of that has been cut out through the 2021 OSSC using the option 1 path. And that, of course, there leaves a little bit more to happen through the 2023, 2026, and 2029 to essentially cut an additional chunk out of the blue pie that's not showing the right side. But one thing that's really important is that in order to know that you're meeting this, you need to know, have a very accurate idea of what is this 2005 code. And it sort of sets the standard for what needs to be done to reach the target for 2030. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Hold on. It's back. Thank you. So I apologize for that to the members here, but as you can see, the gray portion of the pie on the right is what's been cut out through the 2021 code. And then through 3 code cycles, we'll be taking more out of the regulated loads. Of course, that as we get closer and closer to 2030, it gets a little tougher to cut extra out, of course, because you always need to heat a home. You need to ventilate it. You need water heating. But we are on track. Let's go to the next slide so we can see about the 05 baseline. After the adoption of the 2021 OSSC, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, NEA, prepared this report that you see on the screen for looking at the 2005 Oregon Code baseline, which we did a bit of work back and forth discussing with NEA, sort of coming up with agreed upon measurements. And what they did was looked at and did some modeling to look at the 2017 Oregon Residential Specialty Code, the 2021, and then their view of where the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home may be. That's the purple bar for 2023. It really shows that Oregon has been on target for meeting that 2030 goal. As you can see, it's sort of it's at the 40 line of regulated loads. And if we do the ZERH equivalency in the next code, we're maintaining progress to meet Executive Order 2004, as well as meeting Executive Order 17-20, excuse me. So a good bit of coordination with NIA. The division, of course, we do our own modeling. Next slide, please. And we, in order to keep track of things during actual adoption process of seeing where things are going to be, not waiting, not looking at after the code is done, we have done our own modeling. And as you can see, the blue line, of course, is NIA's progression from the previous slide. In 2023, once the code is adopted, we expect them to do a model of our 2023 code. It's not determined yet, but the division's modeling has been for the 2005, 2017, 2021, and then, of course, the 2023 code baseline that's being put forward. We're maintaining that same slope, moving toward that 40% end target goal. Of course, the 2026 and 2029 codes are definitely out in the future. And, these are just sort of estimates of the continuing progression toward what would be the 2029 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. We do expect to see a report in after adoption again from NIA to sort of show where they're seeing us on this progress as well. They're one of our important partners in energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So again, that 2005 baseline is very important. We've worked with ODO as part of the requirements under the executive orders to be in consultation with ODO, and we've worked with NIA and our regional partners, really to make sure that when we're moving forward for consistent modeling and reporting methods, the original baseline, of course, for 05 was really important. In our works, we recognize that it's important to have consistent listing of the construction types. We have a wide variety of mix of crawl space homes versus slab on grade homes. We have different HVAC system types that could be used in the code, whether it's based on the fuel or the actual HVAC system itself. So working with our regional partners, we've come up with regional data to sort of weight that end result. What does this look like when you were to build to the code with different types and styles of homes? The division documents every one of the our assumptions that we use in the code. We sort of set an order of importance for the division. We look first at the U.S. Department of Energy's models. They have are required and federally mandated to do rulemaking using a certain size home and certain comparisons. So we begin with the federal rulemaking home size for us. We then looked national laboratories, National Renewable Energy Lab, Lawrence Berkeley, and others. And then, of course, to regional data when it's important to find some specifics, such as the weighting of the different housing types. This helps us get to real good apples to apples comparison to show our progression to meeting the executive orders. Again, when we looked at the ZERH equivalency, we worked directly with the ZERH program administrators to sort of get what would they have, what could be done, how would you look at a ZERH compliant building for the energy code provisions that we regulate. Next slide, please. So the division does present and has available for any of the codes and also for our Zero Energy Ready Home baseline draft 2023 residential code. We have list all of our assumptions. They're available on the website. We have even been able to share, for people who wish to see them, our actual REM rate models that we developed. As you'll see here, we have links to in the far right column of our data sources to let people know this is where we're starting from. We have the components, whether the home, the ventilation system, et cetera. what the input is, additional notes on the assumptions. And again, for the 2023 code, we put together this to show items that are changing. So the items in red are sort of highlighting where something may be different from the 2021 code. And so this leads us to the 2023 residential code adoption process. Next slide, please. So for 2023, for the residential code, we've developed a baseline chapter 11. That's the energy chapter, just like the structural code uses chapter 13, and then we go to 90.1. Chapter 11 is being put forward for the residential board and their code committee is what we would consider the new model code. Because of the executive order, we have a target set for us of trying to achieve that zero energy ready home equivalency. And they'll treat this, the residential board will treat it like any other code cycle. What they do is they review the base code, this quote, starting point, which includes revisions from the 2021 code, and also public code change proposals. The residential board did appoint a code committee to review the code. What they will do their work, they will send recommendations to the Residential and Manufactured Structures Board, and then they in turn will review the recommendations from the code committee and then forward recommendations to the division for adoption. As we noted earlier, we had to set this up so that the baseline chapter 11 code that they will review, the starting point is really meeting the zero energy ready equivalency, fulfilling Executive Order 17-20. So if we get the books out on time in October, we will have met the requirements. In October of 2023, we'll have met the requirements for Executive Order 17-20. As a note, the Code Committee's first meeting is October 27th. And they will be starting with Chapter 11 Energy Code, and most likely will have then have a follow-up meeting after the other code sections are reviewed. Next slide, please. And to go through the 2023, the significant changes that are being put forward. One of the first ones is there was an additional measure number 7 that gave credit for window area, which did not move the code. It actually created a loophole and moved the code backwards. That is being proposed as taking out of the code. It didn't have any effectiveness. The next big step is continuing the movement toward bringing ducts inside. This is probably the single biggest note on efficiency for residential construction is getting the air conditioning system, the air handler, and the ductwork all the way inside the building. It's becoming a more common practice. And as a side note, really most of the starter homes that had been in the quote all electric zonal heat in the past met this requirement. So the lower cost homes are already on the path. One of the big items, of course, as part of this is that the fan unit, your air handler, does need to be inside the envelope. That's moving. There was some, as part of clarification, is getting that piece inside because most of the leakage for your home furnace is actually happening at the connections and around the unit itself. But in order to, even as, more builders are moving toward putting units inside, we've recognized that we have to have the ability to have some flexibility for this next code cycle. So those that have moved in the 2021 cycle to have deeply buried ducts in the attic, which was a big move in the 2021 code, if they wish to continue to go with buried duct, it does require you pick a second additional measure. So not just one, but 2 additional measures. There has been some analysis done by one of the code proponents that, the HVAC or one other selection along with water heater selection really is very cost effective. We do maintain a limited duct allowance, because sometimes, even though all your ducts inside, you may have to run something to a remote location. So that's still in the code for a small section to be outside the envelope, but with clearer and more enforceable language. When it comes to air sealing on the homes, in the 2021 code path, there's a prescriptive path of air sealing and also at the request of the home builders to have a blower door testing option. This was new in the 2021 ORC, and as part of that, there was an additional air sealing requirement that was proven to be highly cost effective and make a big change, was included in the 2021 ORC as mandatory. As a general note, if the blower door testing is going to be used in the blower door test path, the test rate will be 3.25 air changes as the leakage result. Looking at what is happening with program homes, we have a sample of over 17,000 homes that were built in the past 5 years. They were averaging 3.07. And of the homes in the most current 2 years, 6,000 homes averaged substantially under 3.0 at a 2.90 average air change rate. So air sealing, if you're going testing path, is really just catching up with what is happening in program homes that do testing anyway. Next slide, please. All right. One of the next items comes from the NIA 2005 baseline report. What they were doing in that report we saw earlier, they were pointing out items that will probably be part of code in the future. One of the items we looked at is the smart thermostat. It's a recommendation from the report. We have studies from around the country, in addition to one from the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance done last year that showed on average these new thermostats can save 4% or more of total home energy use. The division, in looking at the energy modeling of this, we're taking credit only for a 4% heating and air conditioning savings, not whole building. In reaching out to what could be put into code for this, one of the important pieces we noted was to have occupancy sensing on the unit. There are Energy Star labeled units available. And one thing we wanted to make sure is we know that not everyone has an internet connection. So to get the savings, this does not require an internet connection. However, it does align with where future codes are going and looking at resiliency of the electric grid. The Department of Energy has just passed a appliance standard for water heaters. Electric water heaters need to be able to respond and communicate with the electric grid just in case of emergencies. And a good example of this is just what happened this summer in California. The California utilities were looking at possibly having massive numbers of rolling blackouts, and they sent out notifications to everyone to do the little bit of conservation that's involved in these new smart technologies, and none of the utilities had to do a shutdown. So that was good news and sort of a view at the future. With the smart stat, of course, we have an exception for smaller systems. Some of the mini splits and variable refrigerant systems need proprietary thermostats, and they're smaller. We're looking at under 2 tons. And also when you have a zonal home, electro resistance heaters, small heater in a bathroom or a laundry room, something like that, of course, you wouldn't need a smart thermostat for that. Next slide, please. All right, so one item that came up was looking at Solar Ready, which came into the 2021 Oregon Residential Special Code. Because the code language wasn't good from the model codes on how to deal with exceptions, the 2021 residential code didn't have exceptions for needing to put in the raceways and space for having the home photovoltaic ready. But during the 2021 residential REACH code, we looked closer at the model code and looked at how we could bring in exceptions and have it in working language. The solar industry, builders, electricians came together and developed a enforceable path for being able to get an exception from being solar ready and saving those costs. So if you do have a home that's, you know, in a canyon or is surrounded by 100-foot Douglas fir trees, if that site can be built without being solar ready. But the plans for buildings that do have a solar resource just need to identify where the photovoltaics would go in the future, so that this is part of being solar ready, that the plans show where the owner and a future solar installer could put solar panels. In addition, there are, for the residential process, there were about 32 public proposals that were put in. 24 of these were energy related for Chapter 11. Majority of them were non-substantive. A lot of editorial fixes, updating language, getting latest standards into the code, some items from the fenestration industry that really going to help update some fairly old language for small production lighting fixtures, or excuse me, windows. And of course, there are a few substantive ones that will be reviewed by the code committee. This is the first code cycle using the updated adoption rules for residential code, where when there is a substantive change and it involves cost and energy efficiency, that people can look at whether or not they can compare codes. So when we go through this, we have a weighted average. When we went through the process, that we compared the modeling of all the different types of residences in 2 climate zones built to the proposed 2023 OSSC. And then we took the exact zero energy ready home guidelines for those same buildings and weighed those and did a weighted average of those, and comparing these 2 sets of models using REM rate. The 2023 baseline code is meeting the zero energy ready home program, but one bonus that we have is that, and the reason for using REM rate is that it's actually a requirement of the zero energy ready home program. So if you're seeking a zero energy ready home program certification, you're using REM rate. And with that, next slide, please. And if a builder is building and wanting to go through the zero energy ready home program, and you're doing your REM rate report, you can actually publish an output that says whether or not your home is zero energy ready home ready. What we have here on this screen is showing we took one of our homes and went through that process, and it shows that to meet ZRH, that using the 2023 code for this one is for gas heat with a crawl space built in Salem, that it passes. And it shows that you don't have to do exactly what is in the prescriptive zero energy ready home program. If you'll note on the right, this is a certificate for an imaginary home built at our location in Portland, and it's using a 3.5 air change per hour home. So what's in our assumptions for the air leakage for homes, it comes out and it shows that it does pass. And the nice part about this is that if you are going through the zero energy ready home certification or the Energy Star program, which will also require one of these reports, upcoming soon, there will be some new federal tax credits, I believe, of $2,500 if you're going Energy Star and $5,000 if you're going through the Zero Energy Ready Home Program certification. So this sort of all ties in. Next slide. But one thing to show is we did run the 2017 Oregon Residential Specialty Home and said, hey, give us a zero energy ready home report. And as you can see, our 2017 code didn't quite make it. It will sort of say, give you, the blue arrow is pointing to rather small text, the building does not meet DOE zero energy ready home for the following reason, and it didn't meet the minimum HERS rating output. So, and a few other things that weren't in our 2017 code. So with that, next slide, please. Just want to say that, we're on the residential side. We're well on track to meeting the equivalent performance of the Zero Energy Ready Home program, and we'll be checking off the box for meeting Executive Order 1720 and actually making it a little better when it came to the solar ready provisions. The proposals will be considered for enhancing the equivalency. And as part of this, we're showing that we're continuing to track on those energy reduction goals that are set in Executive Order 2004 on the residential side. I believe we'll be getting information over the coming year to see where on the commercial side, as we continue to use standard 90.1, how the commercial code is going. With that, I'd like to thank the chair and members of the board, and am available for any questions you might have.
Okay, does anyone have questions for Mark? I appreciate the amount of work that went into that, Mark. It's a very nice report.
Gary,
Excuse
has a
me.
question?
I've got my hand up.
Okay, right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not a question, Mark, but just kudos to the division, I think, for all these years keeping Oregon's code ahead of the curve, so to speak, below the line, ahead of the curve, and keeping us on track for our goals to reach zero energy ready and a 60% reduction, and while keeping the residential code simple and easy to enforce, as evidenced by studies that have been done showing high levels of compliance. So just want to say kudos, good job, keep it up.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, item.
One more.
This is Blake Shalide with the Oregon Department of Energy.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just a similar comment with regard to all the past work and outreach that's gone into the analysis that informed the 2006 era baseline, the 2017 code performance, 2021, and then with this one, I know that BCD and a lot of the other stakeholders and our agency, ODO, have been able to do a lot of outreach just to develop the inputs and the models and the assumptions that go into these energy models to look at the performance. So we really value all the work that's gone into that the last time around. And then I'm sure there'll be some additional discussions at the code committee and the code boards this time coming up over the development process too. But look forward to continuing that so that there's consensus and agreement with regard to the performance of meeting the ZRH totals. And I just wanted to also ask Mark, will that presentation be available on the website? I thought it's a great reference and resource to look back.
The chair, Mark Heiser with the division, yes, it will be available. We're putting a lot of pieces together at the last minute. So yes, we will have it. We will have I'm certain Debbie will have that on the site later.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, item 4B, review of the standard 90.1. Mark again?
Oh, I actually covered that earlier, but yes, once again on standard 90.1. Oops, sorry about that. The update is coming soon to a bookstore near you will be standard 90.1 2022. They're working diligently, and big kudos to our staff on getting the mechanical code and the structural code out. Sometimes things just don't go as good as you planned, and when their code books are getting bigger, more complex, and just dealing with it, we do expect to see. We have been promised there will be a 90.1 2022 code available for purchase before the end of the year. So we're hoping that happens. And along with that, was discussing with the U.S. Department of Energy staff while I was in Atlanta how they're going with the, they have a lot of work to do under federal rulemaking to look at the code and do analysis on it and, guarantee that it is better than the last code and do quantitative and qualitative analysis in their reports. And but they need an official final book to finish up their work as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Item 5 is appeals. It shows
Chair,
none.
Eric Sandoval has his hand up.
Yes, through the chair. This is Eric Sandoval just responding to the 90.1 2022 version of that. Mark, I know that some of the questions that had happened in the previous acceptance was that there was a com check alignment with that newer version. Do you have any information from the Department of Energy on how that might, or what the lag is from the 2022 90.1 version and the com check availability to incorporate that? Did they promise anything from DOE?
They didn't have promises of the release date for, again, Mark, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the chair, they make that their first priority for any new com check, because that's the quote official code that they're doing everything from. So they have done some prior, there are a few things that are going to be a little more interesting for enforcement. I had done before this past week a few questions to them about, they have essentially an additional measures piece that may be coming in, and they've already worked out how to do that for other codes. So one of the bigger questions I had is that they're probably on track. We would expect it. Again, it might take 6 months to a year after publication for them to get it, but that's within their timeline, of getting things working, and for us and our timeline for actually making it available. If it's not available, that may we'll be looking at that as it goes on to make sure we have this important tool for use. And we will see how that goes. I do expect them to have that within a year, though. Worst case, it might take them 15 months, but that's one of their promises, is to make sure they have that compliance tool.
No additional questions. Thank you, Acting Chair.
Okay, thank you. I guess, Debbie, maybe you could help me and make sure I don't miss these hands up. I'm looking at a fairly small screen. I apologize. So item 5 was appeals. There isn't any. Item 6 is unfinished business. I don't see any. Item 7 is board approval of draft rules defining a process for adopting the Oregon Structural Specialty Code energy provisions. And I guess this is going to Ian. And Ian, did we get any public comments that came in later?
No public comments, Acting Chair. Thank you, Acting Chair Kyle. Ian Paik, analyst with the division. The division requests that the board review the division's draft rules defining a process for adopting Oregon Structural Specialty Code energy provisions. The division's proposed rule language is intended to standardize the process of adopting ASHRAE 90.1 into the OSSC and create additional transparency about the process to allow for meaningful engagement by stakeholders and the public. This will require a motion, examples of which will be found in your agenda. Mark Heiser is also available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion towards this item?
Acting Chair, this is Eric Sandoval. I was hoping for some discussion prior to making the motion. Is that available to us?
Certainly, we could either do it before or after the motion, but yes.
In that case, I'd like to make a motion and then provide opportunity for the discussion after the motion.
Okay, we'll make that available. So you like to state your motion?
Yes, the motion is to approve the division draft rules defining the process for adopting the energy provisions of the OSSC and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption.
Okay,
I'll
a motion
second.
is on the floor, but we'd like to make, is there discussion?
I'll second it if you need a second. This is Gary.
All right, thank you. Okay, it's open for discussion now. Eric?
Yeah, so in the discussion, I'd just like to go through these pieces that are proposed here on the adoption process, the 1, 2, 3, and 4. These seem to be pretty straightforward and aligned with other methods of adopting code. I see specifically this desire or intention to, within the 180 days of the publication of the standard, to begin the adoption process that allows us some flexibility to go through proposals for changes and also reviewing the documentation. That six months period looks adequate to me to dig in and figure out what kind of issues are there, plus looking at some history of the ASHRAE standard and how it was adopted. So that seems adequate to me. And also, as we just heard from Mark, that there's a hope that there would be this tool, this check availability within a year, and maybe 15 months, that would fit within an overlay time when we would be able to not only look at the standard and start to modify it if possible for the state, but also have assurances that there would be some tool that would work that piece together. And looking also at some of the 90.1 proposals for 2022, it appears that there's some modeling availability and some annual work that's being done as opposed to just the full power on equipment. So I think all those things are available in that 180 days, and that seems adequate at this time. So I'm supportive of this proposal. No additional discussion from me, Acting Chair.
Okay. I guess the question I would have is just going to come back to this board for the final approval, or is it, are we sending it off to rulemaking? We're done.
I think that's to Ian, correct? Is that right, Acting Chair?
Yes.
Acting Chair Kyle, it's Alana Cox from the division. So generally the rulemaking and subsequent adoption means we would not bring it back, but certainly if there were comments received at the public hearing that we felt merited additional discussion, we would bring it back if it changed, if we were proposing to change the rules. But if there were not comments that changed the rules, we would not bring it back.
Okay,
if you would
thank
like
you,
it brought
Alana.
back, we could.
Okay, any other discussion? Oh, Gary, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary Hakenin, Building Code Structures Board Representative. I don't expect this to be the case, but I think it looks like there's enough allowance there in the language. But if for some reason, Mark, 90.1 as it advances doesn't keep up with our goals of getting to a 60% reduction, it looks like there's enough in the language of the proposed rules for us to tweak it as necessary. Is that the way you would see it?
Through the Acting Chair, Mark Heiser with the division. Yes, there's flexibility. The intent of course, of going with these rules are intended to align with what's been stated in the past, and the promises we have made to energy stakeholders and comments in the past is to get, when we moved to 90.1, it was getting to a more advanced energy code faster than the previous processes. It was to the energy analysis, the cost analysis took place at the national level in very detailed manner that we could reproduce here in the state. And that if needed, of course, yes, once, just a little highlight once again, once it's published, we would be coming, once we know there's an actual copy, we come to you as within that 180-day period and say, you know, it's time to move forward and start reviewing the code. And that gives, of course, also allows for some time to look at the document for the public and our board members to sort of get a feel for what's in 90.1 2022 and see if there have been some errata or pieces that we should be aware of to sort of fully understand the new document. And then the adoption process happens. The division, yes, does have the leeway to look at, did they make the reduction goals and the targets, you know, on aligning with Executive Order 2004 we have the federal government doing their analysis on it. So we're getting, you know, free energy modeling from the Department of Energy. And part of that is, well, they say how much better 90.1 2022 is than 90.1 2019. So that comes with this. Yeah. So that's another reason for the addition, you know, having some of that time delay and flexibility, and then what the division can do to align with statute and regional needs and so forth that come under development of the draft document under Part C. So yes, we do have that flexibility.
Good. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
I can, from my small screen, I can see Ilana's still at the chair. Did you have any other comments?
No, I just didn't want to skulk off into the background again, but I can do that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor, and I guess the discussion is no more discussion. I don't see any hands. So we have a motion to amend and approve the division's draft rules defining the process for adopting the energy provisions of the OSSC and forward to the administrator for rulemaking and subsequent adoption. Debbie, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Matthew Roselle,
Aye.
Walter Cottle,
Aye.
Blake Schlide,
Yes.
Ryan Richards,
Aye.
Eric Sandoval,
Yes.
Gary Heikkinen,
Aye.
Acting Chair Thomas Kyle.
Aye.
Mr. Acting Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Item 6 is announcements. It says there's none. Item 7, I guess unless there's somebody else that has any comments, there be no further business of the October 18th, 2022 Construction Industry Energy Board meeting. It's adjourned at 12. I'm in Texas, so is it 9:25 or 10:25?
Yes, 10:25.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.